Today's video is brought to you by the Ridge Wallet, the ultimate solution for your daily carry needs. More on them in a bit. Every day, students go to school to learn, but it's not just the students that are learning. Countless studies are being conducted, and educators are trying to determine the best and most efficient ways for people to learn. If you were to poke your head into an elementary school today, you'd probably see that the lessons were rather different from when you were a child. And also, please don't do that. But depending on how old and potentially out of touch you are, you may be surprised that it is no longer common to smack children with rulers. You may also be confused by teachers using phonics and phonemic awareness to teach children how to read rather than using the whole word method. That particular example has been a matter of an intense century-long debate, but these other discoveries completely changed what had been the conventional wisdom surrounding educational learning. Imagine a classroom where all the students perform poorly on standardized testing, showing that they have fallen behind in terms of what someone at their grade level should know. While we're at it, imagine that standardized tests aren't controversial because they're not actually the point of this. You have a group of students who seem to be measurably falling behind, and it's time to find a solution. The solution seems pretty straightforward. These students know less than they should, so they need to be taught more. This could mean fewer breaks, longer school days, accelerating the pace of class, and anything else to give them as much information as possible. And this absolutely doesn't work. We have three types of memory: sensory memory, working memory, long-term memory. Sensory memory is essentially input from our senses, things that we hear, see, feel, and it lasts about a second. From there, it can be converted into working memory. Working memory, also referred to as short-term memory, though some would argue that they are different things, lasts for about 10 to 20 minutes. And most importantly, people can generally only hold 5 to 9 things in working memory at a time. By trying to thrust too much information or too much sensory input on a person at a time, they can experience cognitive overload. There are a couple of issues that result from having too heavy of a cognitive load. If 5 people are all trying to talk to you at the same time about different things, or you are being visually bombarded with too many graphics too quickly, the sensory memory gets overloaded and it cannot all be transferred to working memory. If that information does make it to working memory, having too many different pieces of information at a time makes it difficult to transfer much of it to long-term memory. Even if it does transfer, there is a high chance that an oversized load will result in various forms of errors. This can result in either storing incorrect information in long-term memory or making false associations between various bits of information. Based on the idea of cognitive overload, there are a few ways to improve how information is taught to achieve greater overall results. The first is obviously to slow down in general. A person can only have so much in their working memory at a given time, so it's best to give them time to fully understand it before trying to move on to new information. By giving students time to properly retain information rather than bombarding them with more stuff that they could possibly remember, it's actually going to increase how much they learn overall. So today I'm excited to tell you about one of my favorite daily carry items, and that is the Ridge Wallet, and also, of course, their key case. This is a relatively new addition to me, and I'll tell you about this first because I got it in my hands. Basically, it's a Swiss Army knife for keys. You take the keys off that stupid, jangling, giant thing of keys with all sorts of crap on it that you've had forever, and put them in one of these Ridge, sort of like a Swiss Army knife sort of thing going on. It all fits perfectly. These are my work keys, and I have them in the order that I enter the building. So that makes everything very, very easy. There's also the Ridge Wallet, of course. You've heard me talk about this before. 30 different colors and styles to choose from, including burnt titanium, which I love. That's what I generally have right now. They've got a black one as well, regular titanium. I was using that, swapped it out a few days ago, because why not? It can hold up to 12 cards, although like a regular person, I think I've got 3 in here. Yeah, 2 credit cards and my driver's license. Plus, it's got RFID blocking technology to keep digital pickpockets out of your wallet. Plus, it's got a 99-day risk-free trial, so if you don't love it, send it back. No worries. And as a special treat for you, dear viewer, you can use my unique link at ridge.com/sideprojects, or check out the link in the description below and you'll get 10% discount on your purchase with the code SIDEPROJECTS. Upgrade your wallet today. Thanks to Ridge for sponsoring. Link below. And now back to today's video. The next is to change how the information is being presented. Visuals can be a good way to help demonstrate a point, but you don't want somebody to become overwhelmed with too much sensory input. And finally, there is the idea of chunking information. While we can only store a few things in our working memory at a time, if you can combine multiple pieces of information into a single thing, then it increases how much somebody is able to learn at once. The more you know, the faster you can learn. Somebody who is a novice in a subject may struggle to learn as each thing has a heavier cognitive load. Someone who is more experienced, however, will not only have less of a cognitive load while learning related information, but their existing knowledge will allow them to efficiently organize the new information into chunks that can be wholly retained. This allows them to move more new information from working memory to long-term memory at a time than a novice could, even if that information is much more complicated, thus speeding up the learning process. You mad, bro? Well, that's probably going to make it harder to learn anything. Because the learning system contains both the hippocampus and the amygdala, parts of the brain that are largely responsible for long-term memory and emotions respectively, these two brain functions are closely related. This creates a somewhat complicated relationship between learning and emotion. If you think back to some of your earliest memories, they may have been somewhat traumatic events. Maybe it was a time you were exceptionally scared, anxious, or embarrassed. Being in a heightened emotional state tends to create more accurate and longer-lasting memories. But over time, negative emotions can decrease our ability to process information and develop long-term memory. If a person is constantly anxious, stressed, afraid, or embarrassed, it can negatively impact their brain's ability to learn. This is true regardless of whether that person has any sort of psychological condition, such as an anxiety disorder. It also doesn't matter whether or not the classroom is even the cause of these negative emotions, because it is the emotions and not their cause that have the direct impact on the ability to learn. Maybe the person trying to learn is just really hungry, and the constant physical sensation of hunger is causing them to feel anxious about when they can eat again, or embarrassed that the rest of the class might hear their stomach growl. The problem of emotions is also much worse in children. If you've ever seen a child burst into tears because their grilled cheese sandwich was cut vertically instead of diagonally, preach. You probably realize that kids lack the necessary experience and development to regulate their emotions. It would be easy to think that the solution to this is to sterilize classrooms and turn the students into emotionless drones focused solely on learning. And look, kids would never cooperate with that anyway, but it's still a bad solution. People remember emotional events better than neutral events, so everybody speaking monotone in a grey room is not going to work. The key is to try to maximize positive emotions rather than negative emotions through creative learning experiences. If you think about every success story you've heard, they generally talk a lot about all the times they failed. Few people are instantly successful in everything they do. There are normally lots of failed attempts before they finally succeed. Not only is making mistakes inevitable, it's a key part of the learning process. People need the experience of having done something wrong so they know not to do it again. If you have children, particularly teenagers, this is also why they refuse to listen to you and do stupid things even though it turned out exactly how you told them it would. This should all seem pretty obvious. You undoubtedly already understand that you learn from your mistakes and that you get better at something the more you practice. However, we tend to apply this principle more when it comes to doing things rather than learning academic subjects, even though the principle is exactly the same. Students are met with a lot of pressure to succeed, both from the educational system and from parents. Despite being a normal part of the learning process, failure is generally considered to not be an option. Children are pressured to succeed at all costs, and this pressure can result in students being extremely anxious and stressed all the time. As we discussed previously, this only further inhibits learning and long-term memory formation, in addition to damaging their self-confidence anytime they fail. Removing the pressures of success while still facilitating students to succeed can work wonders. Though it hasn't been universally accepted by schools, this is something that MIT has been doing for 55 years. The main reason given for the initial decision was to lower the school's exceptionally high freshman suicide rate, but in 1968, MIT decided that every freshman class would be graded exclusively on a pass-fail basis. This has since been rolled back a bit, with only the freshman semester being pass or fail, but the results are undeniable. Those attending MIT often breezed through K through 12 with very little effort, only to discover that MIT classes were much harder than anything they'd ever been exposed to. Many of these freshmen had no idea how to study because they'd never really needed to, and the tests were much more difficult than anything to which they'd previously been exposed. MIT has seen great success by removing letter grades from freshman classes and making them pass-fail. Not only did it help lower the suicide rate, but it gave students a better chance for success. The material wasn't made any easier, but the pressure to be at the top of the class was removed. Suddenly, failing at individual assignments or tests was an option. All that mattered was that they gained the experience necessary to learn how to succeed in these more difficult classes without needing every step along the way to have been perfect. Giving students the freedom to learn through failure before taking off their training wheels has been a massive success for the school. It's considered an unconventional approach, but it probably shouldn't be, because there's no arguing with the results. The change to grading has done nothing to hinder the success of the students, and MIT is routinely ranked among the top 5 schools in the entire world. Humans are social creatures. Some people prefer longer periods of solitude than others, but some variety of social interaction is considered by neuroscientists to be just a fundamental human need, like food or water. This isn't particularly unusual, as most animals are social, but it does also relate to the learning process. People actually learn better when collaborating with others. Sort of. It's pretty complicated, and researchers are still trying to figure out how exactly we can best utilize what certainly appears to be true. There have been numerous research studies that demonstrate a marked improvement in learning outcomes when students work either in pairs or small groups. The results are compelling, and it all seems very straightforward. But the research is effectively being performed under what would be considered laboratory conditions. Observations from actual classrooms show a different story. A number of problems arise when classes are given group assignments for which they'll receive a single grade. Some students will dominate the conversation and make unilateral decisions on what should happen. Others may attempt to skate by without doing anything, and others may either become resentful over having to carry the rest of the group or fearful that they will receive a poor grade based on what they believe will be inferior work from their partners. More research is being conducted to try to bridge the gap between the theoretical and practical benefits of group work. But there is one area where collaboration has been shown to be extremely successful: peer tutoring. If you couldn't guess from the name, peer tutoring is when one student tutors their classmates on the material being taught in class. Unlike larger group collaborations where social dynamics seem to be hindering the expected benefits, peer tutoring benefits from only being a pair of students with a clear tutor and a clear tutee. These relationships are highly beneficial for the success of both students involved. One of the most effective ways to learn something is to try and teach it to someone. Forcing yourself to understand a subject and then explain it to someone else, often in simple terms, is an effective way to reinforce knowledge for the tutor. The tutee naturally benefits simply from getting an opportunity for more practice on a subject in which they're struggling. Beyond that, they may be more inclined to ask questions in a one-on-one setting with a peer rather than needing to raise their hands and ask the teacher in front of an entire classroom. Even the language used can make a difference, as a peer can explain things using words and analogies that are more familiar. Even though there's more we still need to understand about how social collaboration can effectively benefit learning, there are some clear gains that can be made when it is implemented in ways where the social aspect doesn't overpower the collaborative aspect. It started becoming popular in the 1970s before exploding in the 1990s, but the idea has existed for a long time. Everybody has a different learning style. There are a lot of different proposed frameworks for what these styles include, but the most popular is the VARK model. The VARK model gets its name from its 4 proposed types of learning: visual, oral or auditory, reading, writing, and kinesthetic. Now, it's true that these are different ways in which we can learn something, but it has nothing to do with the individual person. It has to do with the task at hand. If you want to teach somebody how to catch a ball, you can't just hand them a written description of the process and expect it to help. Even explaining what's about to happen and what they need to do as you prepare to toss them the ball is only going to go so far. The task requires hands-on learning. Numerous studies have shown that students do not perform better better when using their supposed individual learning style to study, and that most students don't even study in a way designed around what their learning style is claimed to be. Specific audio or visual aids may be beneficial for teaching different topics, but there is little evidence that different people have different learning styles as a general rule. Despite all of the evidence against it, nearly 90% of teachers report believing in matching instruction to individuals' learning styles. Unfortunately, this can result in a lot of effort being spent on focusing on catering instruction to something that isn't going to yield results. All we can do is hope that in time this myth will die off and time will be better spent creating lessons to employ some of the things that we discussed today, which have shown empirical increase in knowledge retention.